All right, click the links to join our channel here over at SubScribeStar. So in 2012, Star Wars was merely dormant. It was just waiting for the right hand to bring it back and carefully guide it in a new direction. But now, thanks to Disney, it's actually dead. The only people who remember the impact of the Lucas Star Wars, that monster hit in '77, are going to be, I guess, Generation X and some older millennials. The older ones got to see it on the big screen, and the younger ones saw it on the TV. And even on the TV, it still had a huge impact, even when you're watching it on Showtime or VHS. And then even back then in the VHS era, Lucas was coming out with, like, he was tinkering with them and try to improve some of the background scenes, which he did do in some. With Empire Strikes Back, there's a background scene when they're in Cloud City and they're running past plain gray walls in the big screen movie, and then when he went and fixed it, he gave it a background sky, like their windows, and you could see the clouds and stuff, and it actually did look a lot cooler. So the power of Star Wars continued for long after it was out of theaters. And keep in mind, if you want to take a 10-year period of fun movies, you can take 77 to about 1987, maybe even extend it to, like, I don't know, 95 or something. And no, I'm not going to call these movies high art. Movies are almost never reaching that level of fine art. Maybe a dozen movies can be said to have attained that level. And now that I think about it, name some of them in the comments, the movies that you think are in the absolute peak. From maybe Meets Joe Black to Indiana Jones, it's interesting to see what people come up with. And I named those because of the film work and the settings and, like, the technical aspects of it, not the narrative or the acting, which was fine. But it was really like with Meet Joe Black with Brad Pitt, I think back in the 90s, it was more of a vibe of a movie that it carried out for 3 hours, and it really did that pretty well. Others are probably going for the 40s smoky noir detective type of thing, or Citizen Kane. It's just that there are so few movies that aren't obvious propaganda once you put on the They Live glasses and go rabbit hole exploring. Leaving Las Vegas was a monster of a performance by both of the primary actors, but it was ruined with that obvious bit of propaganda of four blonde guys struggle snuggle Elizabeth Shue's character. Statistically, that's almost impossible. I guess, with AI, we can go back and change those men to something more realistic just to watch the SJWs lose their minds. I just said that off the cuff, but that would be so freaking awesome. Even Casablanca, one of my favorites, as like all Humphrey Bogart's movies are just fantastic. What's the one they go in the Mexican mountains hunting for gold? That was great too. The book too, which I actually just picked up the book from the local library. They had the Germans as the bad guys, and it was a pretty light touch back when that movie came out. And it's kind of funny with that kind of stuff is the longer you go back, the lighter the blonde man bad propaganda was. And now it's just cartoonishly weird. Anyway, it hit me when I was thinking about Star Wars and the Disney take on it, is that it didn't add up with what Disney would do to Star Wars, because they killed the brand with woke. And then I realized, well, they probably did it on purpose. The Lucas prequels came out in '99, I think, didn't kill the brand. They were neutral, maybe even slightly positive, because they got the kids of Generation X and younger generations to go back and watch the originals. By then, probably on DVD, and by then there was various versions of Lucas kept tinkering and tinkering with them to the point where even South Park said, enough. There's too many versions of these movies. But though you can still find the original big screen releases, and they are a little bit rough. I will say, like, some tinkering did fix a lot of little flaws, and Lucas should have done the last three immediately after their prequels while the actors were still alive and a bit younger. He could have done them in like 2005, but Disney took over, and all they had to do was continue the theme and the vibe set in the originals. Instead, they got preachy and woke. Nobody wants a female hero or blue-haired Admiral Holdo. Disney could have had a massive success, not just with the movies, which did do well in the theaters, but with the theme park and merchandising, which didn't do well at all. And that really tells you the bigger kind of picture on the movie is, well, how well did the toy sales do? Because sometimes toy sales can be more than what the movie did. And with Disney's Star Wars, none of that stuff did well. I think the only merchandising they've had has been for The Mandalorian with that little baby Yoda doll. They failed because people saw the movies to finish what was started in 77, and the Disney version was horrible. So they stopped after that, and Solo lost money, which was the real indicator, which Disney obviously ignored. But as Vagan always points out, it wasn't that bad of a movie, but people were telling Disney that Disney was off track with the Star Wars trilogy. Then Disney had that very expensive streaming Star Wars various shows, which in total lost money. So you have one of the best known properties on Earth, and you're starting to lose money on them. Well, something's very wrong. And yes, something is very wrong with Disney. And the interesting thing is, are the people at Disney doing this on purpose consciously or merely subconsciously because they're woke and they're hiring woke? Woke writing, woke themes and direction is going to lead to failures because it's propaganda and it's not organic. The more interesting theory is that they made a conscious decision to kill. Oh, giving it to toxic fans. This is ridiculous. There are no toxic fans. There's toxic Disney, but the state of the fans isn't relative or probative to what you're making and selling to them. This is a bizarre copium. And what is it, an excuse for Disney not doing as well to blame the fans? So did they make a conscious decision where the lizards get together to buy the rights and the ones at the top know that they had to kill it? It's the ultimate Gen X film. A blonde hero farmer kid with the qualities of Jesus Christ goes to redeem the fallen angel Lucifer, Vader. He goes into hell for 3 days, but in the movie actually saves his father and kills Satan, the emperor. And Disney looks at the blonde Ubermensch, Luke Skywalker, hero of the galaxy, with his crew of mostly fair-skinned people of the light, honorable mention to Lando Calrissian, who in the 10,000-year cycle of the Falcon destroys the Death Star and surfs the light waves to a few generations of peace. But I think Disney looked at Luke, Han, Leia, Obi-Wan, and they knew that those 4 characters had to be destroyed. They couldn't have blonde Jesus save mankind. And up until Disney came out with the 2015 New Vagina edition, Star Wars was still remembered fondly as the great kids movie that adults could also watch. The main Trinity goes on their adventures, and Han and Leia pair off. For Hollywood, the Star Wars trilogy was pretty good film work, and before Disney got involved, it would have stood the test of time. That's why I said it was 2012. It was dormant. It was just waiting. And like blaming fight choreography is muddled fight choreography. There's a scene where she fights the Red Guards, or she and I don't know the Mary Sue's character and the guy with the Darth Vader type of character. They're fighting the Red Guards, and you slow it down and you watch it, and none of it makes sense. The guards are like walking around in circles and purposely not hitting them. Before Disney got involved, Star Wars would have stood the test of time. And it's like, didn't you have an extended edition to draw from? There's an interview with Kathleen Kennedy. He goes, we didn't have anything to draw from. And everyone's going like, aren't there hundreds of extended edition books? Back in the day of P2P and torrents and whatnot, you could download every book ever written from Star Wars and Star Trek, and it was like a gigabyte file of PDFs and EPUBs and Mobies and whatnot of all the books written. And there's a couple good ones out there. But Timothy Zahn trilogy, I think, is the one that everyone remembers. The Hand of Vader, where she tricks him into assassinating her in a special way so she can escape. Spoilers if you haven't read that trilogy. I mean, I can't imagine you haven't by now. The thing is, you had all those extended universe stories to draw from, and it's like these Disney people had never heard of it because they don't know anything about Star Wars. They don't care about Star Wars. It would have stood the test of time because Gen X would tell their grandkids to watch it, and maybe sometime someone would get the license, someone really passionate, to continue the story from Lucas's estates before he sold it by making strong films for the next generation. And Star Wars obviously wasn't Shakespeare. I know Mike Miller loves to crap all over Star Wars, but he's just such a negative Nancy, that little hobbit. But it was one of the best kids' movies I think ever made. But Disney stopped that when they made their 3 woke garbage films that people saw once and then they promptly forgot, and they cut off the connection to the original Star Wars, which is key. That's the key element that, was it intentional, reckless, or negligent behavior on Disney's part? Because last in time is first in memory, so the younger generation is going to think of the crappy Disney movies first, and they're not going to go see the originals. So Star Wars ends when Generation X dies, and it didn't have to. All Disney had to do was exclude the diversity and the girl power, just make the movies as close to the vibe of the originals as possible, and leave your personal political viewpoints at home. But that's not why they bought the rights to this. Why they paid $4 billion for limited rights to Star Wars. Apparently, they didn't buy all the rights. $4 billion only bought them limited rights. They bought it so they could kill it. They can't have blonde European heroes. And if this sounds a little tinfoil hat, well, welcome to the channel. But look at what they did. My argument seems to match the results pretty well. Like Elon Musk and brain chips and whatnot. It's like, Faraday cages actually are a thing. So they took a machete and they cut off the connection to the originals. Kids will think of Star Wars and they'll think of Disney. And since nobody's interested in Disney Star Wars, they effectively killed Star Wars. And I think for the guys at the top, was Bob Iger in charge at that time? It was a conscious decision. Not for the people below them, but that's kind of how it works. If you want to kill something, you just get a collection of alt-left toxic douchebag soy boy cat ladies to work on the project, and they will make it woke cancer, which is exactly what happened when Leslie Headland, Kathleen Kennedy, and who's that other chick, Alonso or Loxo or something, all the other idiots are interviewed. They're sincere. I don't think they're consciously trying to kill it, but they just don't care if it's good or bad. They get paid no matter what, and they're not going to get fired. If it fails, they'll just move on to something else. They know that they're the originals, or at least in their... Oh, God. She was horrible. Good in Jurassic Park, though. They know the originals in their minds are problematic because in their little brainwashed minds, they see these movies as too masculine and with too many Europeans appearing people. And they'd be shocked if Bob Iger told them to make the Disney versions look and feel like the originals, like Peter Jackson said in his interviews with his other 2 directors for the Lord of the Rings, is that we tried not to put any of ourselves in the movie. We just wanted to stay as close to Tolkien as possible. And look what happened. Massively successful movies with the Lord of the Rings films. But... They didn't leave it alone. They wanted woke diversity vagina films that deconstructed the white heroic originals, i.e. taint them with being very short-term films that leave the public consciousness very fast. And that's what happened with Disney Star Wars. It was in and out. Yes, Disney would have made more money if they stuck to the original look and feel, but they don't care about money. This is their religion. Here's a thought experiment. Take the next Disney movie. Imagine if they found another blonde hero Jedi who has to fight an evil new empire. That's a criminal syndicate taking over the galaxy, and it's a 3-way fight between the Hutts, the Jedis, and these new Sith. But the Sith are all played by Middle Eastern or Indian people or something. And immediately, Indian people now would not go over well with Trump and Musk. You know that they couldn't do it. Imagine a gang of fair-skinned, light eyes and hairs. Those are the good guys, and the bad guys were all darker. Imagine if the director said, "Well, I just want to make it easier to visually distinguish between the forces of light versus evil," and that was just the best way to tell the story. It just wouldn't, obviously it wouldn't happen. Even saying that is tricky for mainstream social media platforms. If you presented that to a group of people, they would look at you like, okay, a joke's over. What's the real plot? Nobody would believe that for an instant. What you get instead is the true story of the Dahomey tribe fighting to end the slaves, the English and the French. Oh no, that's actually the Woman King. That was actually the inverse of reality. Like, we didn't see the Woman King. Yeah, nobody saw the Woman King. That's the point. You get the mirror image world in current year with movies like that, where the English and the French have to fight the Dahomey tribe to stop them, I think, cannibalizing and taking slaves, because the Dahomey loved the slave trade, but somehow Hollywood can't tell the story of the heroic white people. I don't know, maybe half the French, no offense, fighting the blacks to end the slavery that the blacks were responsible for. That's just inconceivable to them. And it's like, if you made that movie, it would sell. You go, yeah, of course we were the Dahomey tribe. We were the best slave traders. Yeah, we killed our enemies and we enslaved them. We won. That's victory for us. It's like, yeah, welcome to the human race. That's what people did all over the world, or equally equivalent, horrific things. It's like, that's the human experience. And you would have told an organic story. It's like, okay, well, this was, a couple hundred years ago. Things are different now. But they couldn't tell that. They couldn't tell the true story of the Dahomey tribe. So Hollywood turns it upside down to make black good and French and English bad, when it's the opposite of history. And I've mentioned this example a few times because it's such a great example, and there's no shortage of other ones, of how evil and anti-white Hollywood really is. Because the story is almost unbelievable. They only made that movie, like 2 years ago, and they did it anyway. And people are going to watch it and think, oh, well, this must be based on a true story, right? That's kind of how naive people are, and it's not a good place for a country to be in. So anyway, the white hero journey ends with blonde Luke Skywalker, and is undone by the Disney storyline where the Emperor is still alive, but a woman kills him. So the Lucas movies, I mean, it's so bizarre that it's a reboot. Even the concept of rebooting movies, it's not a sequel exactly. It's not a reboot. It's not a redo, which is just a retelling of the exact same story. It's kind of like a variation on the theme. It's like, that feels so derivative and pathetic. And the only reason Disney Star Wars made the billions they made was because the concept of reboot is still new. And I mean, even Kevin Smith can do a parody on them. So she kills him, and the Lucas movies are pointless. And the Gen X fan memories are destroyed. Or did they kill it? Because that's just what happens when woke touches original stories that have a little bit of heart and soul to them. Nobody cared about Finn. I mean, I get that you were starting to make him a Jedi, and then you abandoned that plot line. There's got to be some continuity between, like, I know you have two different directors for the three movies, but they have to get together and agree on things and have a through line, a plot line, like they write before they make the movies, like years before they make the movies. The three stories should already be written, and it felt like they were writing it as they went along. Disney can't create new stories. That phase of Disney is over, because good stories that connect to people in an organic way are based in nationalism, and Disney is part of the globalist agenda to destroy the West, to create a rootless class of slaves for the reptilian overlords. You can't have a rebellion when your neighbors are potentially hostile strangers and you're not connected to your past. You're a rootless nothing fighting against overlords who do have an agenda. They know that diversity destroys unions. It's the same concept with countries. So Disney is not going to make an organic nationalist movie, because the American audience, half of them aren't connected to anything. They're already slaves, or potential ones. Everyone in America is actually slaves, if you consider. Isn't inflation an unconstitutional tax? Yes, it is. They'd be reminded that they didn't stay and make their homelands great. They fled to go live in the house of the gods, and a nationalist movie would just be illegal in most European countries. So movies now are just filler and predictive programming fluff to get the cattle to accept their fate. A nationalist movie would just remind half of America that they were too fat and lazy to fight for anything. It'd be the ultimate bread and circuses empire and decay phase of fourth wall breaking. And it would be a fun movie to make. I would love to see how it got reviewed. They made a Civil War movie 2 years ago or something. that nobody watched because they were too vague about what side was fighting what side. It was the equivalent of liberal douche strawman fantasy versus strawman. It's like if they make a black James Bond fighting for what exactly? A paycheck? He's not English, Scottish, Irish, or Welsh, so he's not tied to them by blood and history. He's essentially just a soldier of fortune who would be taking a paycheck from the crown, but if another government paid him, he'd go over to them because why would he be loyal to one or the other? It's why Disney is going to continue to fail. It's going to be in Andor Star Wars, where they spent over $500 million, $600 million on Andor Star Wars, where it's one group of diversity hires with no connection is fighting another group of diversity hires with no connection to anything, or the banking guild fighting the insurance companies for the right to control the central banks and keep the nation in permanent debt and forever wars. One of the Disney Star Wars had that woman in a silver armored suit. Is she in here somewhere? Where they did that because the goal. Oh, there she is. The goal for her was to sell toys because you had the same. I guess it's the same stamp, the mold, but you just color it a different color. But the problem is that even in a galaxy far away, women still make babies, and they're the weaker sex, the fairer sex. They value their fertility, and they're very risk adverse. And their primary value to the tribe is to make and raise babies, and that is hardwired in code into us. The willing suspension of disbelief it doesn't go so far. So women aren't soldiers. Except under very rare circumstances. And if you have to tell that rare circumstances story, then that could be interesting, because that does make it something special, because it is ultra rare. Or when somebody is forced into battle, even if somewhat convoluted, like with the Aliens film and Sigourney Weaver. And when Disney puts women in these roles, the audience just falls asleep because women aren't men, which to Disney is hate speech. Anyway, so there's no hero's journey for blonde biblical Luke, who went to the Garden of Temptation with the advice of his spiritual advisor Yoda, and saw the evil within himself and the challenges he would face. The entire Lucas trilogy was washed away by Disney, and Disney at least knew what they were doing when they revealed the Emperor was still alive, and that Luke and Vader were ineffectual, cucks who didn't actually overcome evil and do something awesome. Instead, Luke is a bitter old bitch who tried to murder his nephew when 40 years ago he saved his father. Or even Mark Hamill in an interview said that isn't Luke Skywalker, it's Jake Skywalker. And he's just kind of dumb. So credit to him for just kind of speaking without a filter, because it was completely out of character, which was the point. Destroy Luke in the original Lucas story and replace it with globalist girl diversity super overpowered Mary Sue character who's doing backflips and juggling a mountain. It's just the most absurd stuff ever. The only I remember is opening up that mountain is there is a comic where Yoda in the I don't know if it's the he like elevates a mountain or a hillside in one of the comics. They undid the entire trilogy. And if they thought they could have got away with using a black trans lesbian, they would have. They knew Daisy Ridley was as far as they could go for the time period, 2015. But they're not done with Star Wars. They have the new one coming out, and she's going to train the next generation of black Mary Sue, Two-Spirit, otherkin Jedi, so they can, and I'm sure there'll be gay relationships in them. Or trans? Probably a bridge too far for them. So they can own the Chads who aren't watching Star Wars. It doesn't seem to make sense, but it does if, for the sake of argument, you assume they're doing this on purpose. The intentional destruction of 3 fun, lightweight movies that are held in fond regard from 77 to, 83, I think. Then you factor in Mark Hamill losing his mind on Twitter about virtue signaling about Trump, which Disney knew the movies would increase his social media footprint, and they knew he was a low IQ liberal the whole time. All this makes more sense if you assume they're evil. And like I said, this sounds so tinfoil hat, just whack job crazy. If I was right, if I was wrong, would they be doing things any different? The purpose of the thing is what it does. There's I mean, some things is like just kind of clueless people throwing darts at the wall, which is, I think, half of this at the director level, the people involved with the movies. A lot of that felt like just you get a group of woke people together in a room and give them a rough outline or rough concept for a movie. They're going to make woke garbage with name recognition that's going to sell once, and then it won't have repeatability. But for the people at the top, I think it's more of a conscious decision of, we have to kill Star Wars. We have to kill Luke Skywalker. We have to kill this, cultural. It's not a hero. It's just a fun time in a history. 3 fun movies that people enjoyed, and they look at this and they go, "Oh yeah, of course we'll kill that." You're gonna pay $4 billion to do this? Yes, they are gladly losing money. They lost like $900 million last year because the Disney streaming shows are so stupid. Because what's the latest show? Skeleton Crew. It's it's a lot of, like, Star Wars now is a lot of Return of the Jedi kind of Ewoks. It's 4 plucky little kids. Probably, I mean, I'm sure all diversity hires, who are running around just being marginalized and oppressed and disenfranchised, and probably something about space capitalism and maybe Trump or something. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys all next episode. Yes, no, I don't know where the little icon is.